What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another critter format video. And this is going to be a long video, but I think that this deck sort of deserves a long video dedicated to it. And that deck is Turtle OTK. Now, there are a couple different ways to build this deck, but the essential idea of it is you get pretty aggressive with things like Dark Elf or Gumo or just your 1800 beaters. And then once you've dropped your opponent down to a low enough life point threshold, you use Ultimate Offering combined with things like Catapult Turtle and Last Will to finish off the rest of your opponent's life points. And this can actually end up dealing a lot of damage. But the way that it does it can be a little bit unclear. So for the first time in this channel's history, I'm going to actually show off the combo outside of a duel to just help you get the intuition behind how this works. And the reason that this is called Turtle OTK in the first place is because this deck can theoretically deal 8,000 damage in one turn, making a one-turn kill, or OTK. So before diving in to the deck itself, let's just show off the combo. So I'm going to use a solo mode replay courtesy of the Discord user Eel in the Critterland Discord. Now, Eel's version of the deck is the one that I largely based my own version of the deck off of, and this replay that they shared in particular was very much an inspiration for me in crafting my own version of it. So I wanted to show this off just to get an idea of what the deck is trying to do and where its potential flaws may be. All you need to perform this combo is an Ultimate Offering and a way to tribute off a monster combined with Last Will, and preferably a Recruiter as well. But you'll see as the combo goes on. So let's say we have a Catapult Turtle, a Witch of the Black Forest, and a Last Will in hand, and an Ultimate Offering set on the field. With this setup, we can actually deal 8,000 damage in a turn if our opponent's board is clear. So what we do is we start by summoning Witch, we activate Ultimate Offering, and use Ultimate Offering to bring out Catapult Turtle. Searching off the Witch, we can find a Jirai Gumo, and now we can also activate Last Will to bring out another Witch. Using Catapult Turtle's effect, we contribute off the Witch, dealing 550, and you'll see what is basically the opponent's life point total for Eel's own life points, just for clarity's sake, to determine how much damage we're dealing here. Off of tributing the Witch, Eel will search a Lodgin, and then they'll activate Ultimate Offering twice to bring out a Lodgin and Jirai Gumo. Attacking in with everything here will be 5,000 points of damage, and then Catapult Turtle will tribute the remaining monsters away, and that will be enough to deal lethal damage. As a note, this combo is only possible because Catapult Turtle this time was not a once per turn effect. So you can use Catapult Turtle multiple times in critter format. The once per turn version of the effect was actually added way later in the game's history because Catapult Turtle was used in a bit too many broken strategies, or at least degenerate strategies. So they changed it to make it less broken. Now, this combo here indicates how the deck can deal 8,000 damage in a turn, but it does need a couple things to go right. If your opponent has like a Waboku or something, you're not going to be able to do 5,000 points of damage through attacking. Worst case scenario, if your opponent has a Mirror Force, then that could just destroy your entire field and make your combo basically dead in the water. In addition, this combo is assuming that you have some way to deal with your opponent's monsters, so that is an important factor of the deck to have. But these sort of caveats for the combo are good to keep in mind for later. What I want to focus on now is how much damage the deck can pump out in a turn potentially. We've seen that it can pump out 8,000 damage here if everything goes right, but oftentimes you don't need to deal 8,000 damage. You just need to deal a lot of damage in one turn. And I think this combo shows off how there is a lot of potential there. Tributing off Recruiters with the Catapult Turtle to search out a big monster that you can then bring out off of Ultimate Offering is very, very strong, and is one of the main selling points of the deck in my opinion. But while you need some very specific cards in order to pull off this combo, outside of that specific core, there are many different ways to build the deck. So I'm going to show off the version that Eel was using here because that was a major inspiration for me in making my own version of the deck. And then I'll show off my version of the deck, saying what I changed from Eel's version and explaining my reasoning why. So this is Eel's version of the Turtle OTK deck. They did have a sideboard before I put it into Dueling Book, but I want to focus on the main deck. In their main deck, they of course have 2 Catapult Turtles, 3 Ultimate Offerings, 3 Last Will, and maximum numbers of Recruiters. And I think in general this is a good ratio. You might think, oh, well, maybe I should just have the 1 Catapult Turtle because I can search out off of Last Will. And that is true, but having 2 can enable you to have another way to trigger Last Will by just tribute summoning out the Catapult Turtle. And it can also protect you against things like Trap Hole, or just cards that your opponent can use to try and stop the combo. Occasionally, you also do want to just set the Catapult Turtle as a 2k defender. It never feels good when you do unless you've used a Change of Heart and are tributing an opponent's monster, but it can come up at times. So Catapult Turtle isn't the worst card to draw, and having it in hand can actually help your combo, as you saw in Eel's solo replay. Now, as I mentioned before, the deck wants to go aggressive to get the opponent down to a threshold where they can actually kill out of nowhere, basically. And the aggressive monsters of choice that Eel is using here are 3 Dark Elves. They do have a Jiraigumo and some Lodgins as well, but Dark Elf is the sort of 3 of big beater in this deck. And this makes sense, you know, you do need a fair amount of life points in order to make sure that you can bring out everything that you want to off of Ultimate Offering when you're going for game. And unlike Jiraigumo, Dark Elf just costs 1,000 life points to attack. So using Dark Elf can keep your life points high enough to enable you to pull off the combo at the end, instead of if you used Jiraigumos potentially. This sort of logic also applies to Eel's choice of counter traps, and you do really want to have counter traps in the deck because, as I said, you know, the combo only really works if you have some way to actually get in without your opponent interacting with you. The counter traps of choice are mainly 7 Tools of the Bandit because, again, a cost of 1,000 life points enables you to be more likely at the threshold to actually use Ultimate Offering enough to kill your opponent. There is also 1 Solemn in case you really need it, but the half life point cost can be pretty steep cost to pay when you are trying to save up enough for the Ultimate Offering at the end. Some more features of note is that they are also playing 2 Maneater Bug, which makes sense because, as I said before in the combo, you know, you need to have your opponent's board clear of monsters in order to actually get into attack. So what you could do potentially is have Maneater Bug set, flip it up, pop your opponent's monster, tribute it over it for a Catapult Turtle, and then activate Last Will that way, bring out a Recruiter, etc., etc. And the last sort of interesting thing of note is that they are playing 2 Magician of Faith as well. This makes sense. Magician of Faith is an incredibly powerful card in the format, and it can enable you to get back removal spells like Raigeki or Fisher or something like that, that can clear the way for your Catapult Turtle OTK. As a note, Magician of Faith doesn't quite help in getting rid of back row clearing the way for your OTK, because if you are trying to OTK in a given turn, you do need Ultimate Offering on the field, so if you get back heavy, you'll lose your main way of OTKing, because you'll have to destroy your own Ultimate Offering in the process of clearing your opponent's back row. Now, of course, there are other features of Eel's deck that I could mention here, but I wanted to mention these main features because these are the main places where I changed up the deck quite a bit. And I don't think that you have to necessarily follow my changes. This deck was good enough to actually get top 8 in a critter tournament. So clearly it has a fair amount of merit. And I think that it is a perfectly valid way to build the deck. So if you want to go with Eel's version when trying out the deck on your own, I think it's a very, very good option to do. However, for building my own version of this, I did make some changes that I think fit my playstyle a bit better. So let me show off my official version of the deck that I'll be using for the dual replays that I'm going to show off in this video. Okay, so here's my version of the deck. And you'll notice that right off the bat that I differ pretty largely in some just design philosophy choices for the deck. And the main place I differ is that I'm going all in on just cards that have your life points. So instead of playing the Dark Elves, I'm playing 3 Jirai Gumo. Instead of playing the 7 Tools of the Bandit, I'm playing 3 Solemn Judgment. And as I mentioned before, this can be quite risky, as you do really want to have a high enough life point threshold at the end of the game to use Ultimate Offering repeatedly. And if you're continuously having your life points, then you might not reach that threshold. However, the reason that I did decide to go this direction is because I feel like most of the time, you just need at least 1,500 life points to pull off the combo at the end. If you can get 3 extra summons off of Ultimate Offering, I find that generally that's enough to kill your opponent if you've been getting aggressive with them and cut their life points down to a reasonable threshold. In addition, I like the fact that you can always use Solemn Judgment in Jirai Gumo, whereas you can't always do that with Dark Elf and 7 Tools. Occasionally you get to a point where, it's late in the game and your life points are low because your opponent's been able to get aggressive and get in some damage, and you aren't actually able to pull off the OTK. The fact that you can still use these cards in those situations makes the deck a bit more flexible, in my opinion. You might also notice that I cut out a fair amount of other cards from the deck as well. I cut out the Maneater Bugs and Magician of Faiths because I felt they were too slow, and while Magician of Faith is very, very powerful, I felt like it wasn't doing quite enough in this deck to merit inclusion. And again, I think that this deck is very suited to my taste, but it's definitely not perfect. And if you want to add in those flip monsters, you definitely can. But I felt like this deck wanted to go mainly very aggro, so I felt like the flip monsters were just too slow to play into that strategy very well. However, I think you definitely could potentially swap some of them out, maybe for some Giant Soldier Stone, as I did go up to 3 copies of Giant Soldier. I think that this is good to serve as just a defensive wall to buy you time while you set up your OTK combo. And it can also pair well with Ultimate Offering, as you're able to bring it out in the battle phase to sort of make up for your lack of Waboku in the deck. You can also bring out Maneater Bug in the battle phase, but that just clears 1 monster. And if you still don't have a way to deal with your opponent's aggression on the next turn, then you can be in pretty dire straits. So I like the Giant Soldier of Stone in that respect. In addition, you'll notice that I actually cut out the Fissures from the deck, and I think this is definitely an iffy decision, as the Fissures can be very good at clearing away your opponent's board, and that is somewhat necessary to get in for the damage you'll need in the OTK portion. The main reason I did this was because I figured that Jirai Gumo should hopefully be enough to clear whatever big monsters your opponent has. But again, this is somewhat risky, as Jirai Gumo can cost half your life points potentially. So I think you can definitely probably swap in some of the Fissures for cards in the deck here. Last major change I made for the monsters is I have 2 Cannon Soldiers. And I think that Cannon Soldier is a very nice card to include in this deck because it's kind of like a backup to the Catapult Turtle. Catapult Turtle can be a little bit finicky. It is a tribute monster. Yes, you can bring it out off of Last Will, but if you can't easily trigger Last Will on a given turn, then it can be a bit tough. So I like having Cannon Soldier as just an extra option in the deck. It may not be able to deal as much damage as Catapult Turtle can, but it's easier to bring out, and 500 damage is a fair amount that can add up quickly if you're tributing off a bunch of monsters, which you can very easily do if you've got Ultimate Offering up and you're just cycling through all the recruiters. So I think it's nice to have that extra option. 1400 attack is also no joke. It can just help deal a little bit extra damage in the attacking portion of the OTK. And also as a note, I have 3 Lodgins here, whereas Eel's Virgin was only playing 2. This is just to get even more aggressive. You could probably swap out 1 for a Dark Elf potentially, but I've grown to not like Dark Elf as I've played with it more. It can't get over 2k defenders, it occasionally can't attack, and oftentimes its cost is generally worse than Jirai Gumo's is, so I've generally come around to disliking Dark Elf. And that's why it's not in the deck, but if you want to include it, you definitely can. For the spells, I didn't really change anything out of swapping out some of the Fissures. I still have the Power 5 limited spells, Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, Raigeki. And I still have the Heavy Storms, which, while it does have anti-synergy with Ultimate Offering, given that you are trying to go aggressive earlier on, it can be very good in the early game. 3 Last Wills are pretty much a must. You could cut this down potentially, but having Last Will makes your combo more alive. So you do want to play 3 just so that way you more consistently draw it. And if you do brick on it, I did also include some Magic Jammers in the deck, as I feel like spells can be very tough for the deck to deal with. And while Solemn Judgment can deal with those spells, like a Heavy Storm potentially, having Magic Jammer is a way to prevent those powerful spells from ruining your day, while also not costing you life points. So if you do brick on Last Wills, you can always discard 1 for a Magic Jammer. And last spell is Swords of Revealing Light. Maybe you could change these out for some Fissures, as this is a pretty aggressive deck. But whenever I've removed Swords of Revealing Light from a deck, I've always regretted it, as this is just such a powerful card in the format. Yes, Heavy Storm can deal with it, but having that option to stall for a bit is just so powerful. And oftentimes your opponent doesn't have the heavies to deal with this, or doesn't actually want to use up the heavies on a card that's going to go away eventually on its own anyways. And that can just make this card very good. For the traps, I've already mentioned the Magic Jammers and the Solemns. As a note, for the Solemns, you generally want to save them for later in the game when you're actually going for the OTK combo, as you don't necessarily want to lower your life points too much early on. But I think that the Solemns did very well for me in the games that I played with the deck, so I really do like them in it. We also have 3 Trap Holes to act as removal in our opponent's turn. This can also be very good at clearing the way for our OTK combo at the end of the game, although it is a bit less proactive. And we also have 3 Ultimate Offerings. Now, 3 can maybe be seen as a bit much, but Heavy Storm is in the format, so it's good to have the backups just in case your opponent Heavy Storms your first Ultimate Offering away. Also, just like with Last Will, if you brick on Ultimate Offerings, you can use them for a Magic Jammer in a worst case scenario. You may notice that the deck doesn't actually play Woboku here, just like Eel's original version didn't really play Woboku. And the reason for this is that Ultimate Offering can sort of act as a pseudo Woboku. It's something that you can activate in the battle phase to bring out a monster to potentially protect yourselves from your opponent's aggressive pushes. So that's why we cut the Wobokus. I think maybe you could cut an Ultimate Offering for a Woboku if you want, but I do think in general you want this deck at 40 cards, because going above 40 here can really decrease your consistency. And given that this is a combo deck that wants to draw into the pieces it needs to finish off the opponent out of nowhere, I do think consistency matters a lot here. For the side deck, we have 3 Magician of Faith, 3 Mass Sorcerer, 3 Fissure. This can enable us to go into a bit more of a controlling strategy if our opponent is on a deck that would suffer against that sort of thing, or if we think our opponent's going to side into anti-aggro or anti-beatdown cards. The Fissures can also be nice to come in if our opponent is playing a beatdown strategy of their own, or playing a lot of defenders that are tough to get over. Oftentimes when I side in the Fissures, I swap out 1 Catapult Turtle and 2 Giant Soldier of Stone, because if you're going up against an aggro deck, the Giant Soldier of Stone will be less useful. I think maybe you could make this change just in the main deck if you do want to get more removal in the main deck. Those are potential cuts you can make, but I think it's just a bit risky to do, as you drop down to a very low monster count, which can come up. Additionally, we have 2 Card Destruction, 2 Robin Goblin, if we want to go into a bit more of a hand control strategy, or if our opponent's on like Exodia and we think they're going to keep it in game 2 or 3. And we also have 2 7 Tools of the Bandit. I think maybe this is an iffy inclusion on the side. I mainly included it just for when testing out the deck if I wanted to swap out some Solemns, but I don't really think it's necessary. So you could swap these out for just a better card in the side deck, honestly. But if you yourself are trying to test out the deck and figure out what amount of Solemns you feel comfortable with versus what amount of 7 Tools you want to include, then feel free to use this in the side deck like this and test it out for your own. As I've said, there are many different ways to play this deck. This is just the one that I settled on. Before we dive into the duels themselves, I just want to show off one more version of a way that you can build this deck and play this deck that I will likely not be showing off on the channel. If there's a lot of demand for it, I will show it off on the channel. But I think the deck is pretty bad, or at least it is just inferior to the more straightforward version of the deck. But it is funny enough that I want to show it off. It does do something different, kind of, from what the standard version of Catapult OTK wants to do. So I figured I'd show it off before diving into the duels using my version of the deck shown here. So this is the defense version of Catapult OTK, and this deck list comes courtesy of the Discord user Blah, who is also going to be featured in the duels today as YGO History 1. This is a very interesting deck list. So basically, this deck aims to stall the opponent until it can actually pull off the OTK. So it's playing a bunch of defenders and like Walls of Illusion as well to clear the way for your monsters to get in a bit more. And it's also playing things like Shield and Sword to supplement the OTK in the end. Because when you're ready for the OTK, what you can do is switch your monsters to attack, activate Shield and Sword, make them all 2,000 beaters, and get in for a ton of damage. I think that this deck, is a potential direction you can go with the deck, because oftentimes the deck can struggle to stay alive while it's assembling the OTK, and this does solve that problem a bit, with the 2K defenders being pretty tough for most decks to get over. I think you could potentially make improvements to this, like, I'm not sure how necessary the castle walls are, although they can be funny in conjunction with Shield and Sword. And things like Tremendous Fire, while potentially good at dealing that last bit of damage, I think if you're going for the OTK combo anyways, you don't necessarily need these. And playing 3 Soul Exchange, I think it can have synergy with Catapult Turtle's effect, as you can use a Soul Exchange to tribute off one of your opponent's monsters for Catapult Turtle. But a big part of this OTK seems to be, making your 2K defenders big beaters, attacking in, and then using Catapult Turtle to finish off the opponent. And if you use Soul Exchange, you can't use your battle phase, which makes it a bit worse. You can use this to just tribute set out a Catapult Turtle, which is nice, but I think 3 Soul Exchange is a bit much. And I think just 1-7 tools and no other way to negate traps is a bit bad, because if you do run into a Wuboku on the turn you try to OTK, you're going to be majorly vulnerable on the next turn. So I think that this deck has a ton of flaws and is not the best version of Catapult OTK that you can play, but this deck is interesting enough and does something different enough from the main version that I did want to show it off in this big discussion video about Catapult OTK, just to show off that there's a lot of different directions you can go. And I think the deck is largely underexplored. This applies to a lot of different decks in Critter format, but I think it especially applies to Turtle OTK, which is a real shame because this deck is really sick. It's a bit tough to play, as you'll see in the games that I show off, but I think it can be really killer. And it can essentially do what the Cannon Burn decks I showed off earlier in my exploration of Critter format are aiming to do, just killing the opponent out of nowhere. But in my opinion, it is a bit more flexible in how it does that. And in order to show off what I mean, I've got 3 different duel replays here. Each of them, I think, shows off a different facet of the deck, and so I wanted to include them all in this video. And hopefully through these duels, you'll, 1, see what I mean by my remarks about the Cannon Burn decks, and also you'll see why I think this deck is so cool. So without further ado, let's dive into the games. So the first game we have here is against History of YGO 1, who is the Discord user Blah, who supplied the sort of Shield and Sword version of the Turtle OTK deck. So they're very active and passionate duelists in the format, so it's always exciting to have them on. So we're playing the version of Turtle OTK that I showed off, my version of the deck, which I know might disappoint all you fans of Extreme Jank that I'm not playing the Shield and Sword version. But if you want me to play that version, let me know in the comments below, and maybe I can figure something out. We lose the rock, paper, scissors, so it looks like we are going to go second here. So let's see what our opponent does. They're just going to set one and pass, and this is a bit awkward for us because we could go aggressive here. We could bring a Jiraigumo, attack in, likely clear whatever they have, and then just pass back to them. However, if we do that, we potentially risk half our life points at a very early point in the game, and it's vulnerable to a lot of things. If their set is a recruiter, then we get majorly punished because they can just set another recruiter, and we'll have to attack over that next turn. So I think doing that play is a bit iffy. And we do have a recruiter of our own in hand, Sangan, so we could just set that, maybe set a trap hole and pass. And it looks like we're going to set Sangan and set heavy and pass. So I guess what we're trying to do here is bait our opponent into setting back row of their own so we can fire off a heavy. I think maybe this is a bit iffy, as trap hole is a very essential piece of removal in our deck. And if they bring out a monster that can beat over our Sangan, and potentially if their set is a Mass Sorcerer, they can get in for damage and draw a card, which would be pretty rough. But I don't hate this play. And if they do bring out a beater, we can always attack over it with Jiraigumo next turn. And if they do have a way to deal with the Jiraigumo, we have swords. I don't hate this play. They're going to just set another and pass back to us. We draw another heavy storm, which is not what we want to really see right now. The first heavy storm is already not really doing anything on this board, so the second is doing absolutely nothing on this board. We're just going to pass back to them, and again, this is a little bit risky, as now they have two monsters on field. If they bring out another and attack over the Sangan, then it can be a bit rough. But I think this deepens our bluff a bit, because we're saying, yeah, we're not worried about what you've got. We've got something that can deal with the worst case scenario. So let's see what they do here. They're just going to pass back to us, and Login is a great draw. Now we can start going a bit aggressive here. We're going to bring out Login, try and attack into the first set they have. It's just a Sangan. They will be able to get a search here, and they're going to search out a Cannon Soldier. That's a bit worrying for us, honestly, because it means that they might have a way to Change of Heart or Login, tribute it off for the Cannon Soldier, things like that. So that's a bit scary. We're going to set a Magic Jammer and set a Trap Hole and pass back to them. The Trap Hole is basically to prevent them from actually managing to stick the Cannon Soldier on field. This won't help if they do try to Change of Heart the Login and then summon that Cannon Soldier, tribute off our Login with priority. But we do have the Magic Jammer if they try to Change of Heart, and we might want to use it on that. We can discard a heavy, because we do have a heavy on field, and we've also committed to a lot of back row here. So if they have a heavy of their own, then we will be forced to Magic Jammer the heavy, which will be unfortunate. But at least we have the Trap Hole to deal with the Cannon Soldier if they do decide to use it. It looks like they're just going to set two of their own and set another monster and pass back to us, which honestly is not that bad. We draw Catapult Turtle, which will be good for later if we can manage to assemble the OTK, but we don't really need to bring it out now. As is, our Sangan has 1,000 attack, which ties with Catapult Turtle. We're just going to attack into their new set, because we're unsure quite what it is. And it turns out it's a Wall of Illusion, so that will bounce our Login back to hand, which is not the best for us. So we have to think here a bit, because we could bring out Login again and just leave it on field as sort of a pseudo wall. But if we're bringing out a pseudo wall, we could bring out Jiraigumo instead. Playing Jiraigumo reveals a little bit what we may be on, or at least that we're on a bit more of an aggressive strategy. So that might not be worth doing. We could also leave the board as is, as they didn't really have a way to deal with it on previous turns. And if they do bring out the Cannon Soldier, we can just Trap Hole it. And it's kind of iffy. We're just going to tribute set the Sangan to get a Cannon Soldier. And I'm not sure how I feel about this, but I guess this is setting up a wall for us. You know, I talked about bringing out a Login or Jiraigumo as a pseudo wall, and, you know, now we just have a regular wall. So we're going to do that, get a search off of Sangan to find Cannon Soldier, and we're just going to pass back to them. They're going to swords, flip up our Catapult Turtles, and now they know we're on Turtle OTK. And it seems like they thought so originally. But now they have the confirmation. They're going to try to change of heart the Catapult Turtle, and we need to Magic Jammer this, because if we don't Magic Jammer this, then they'll just be able to tribute off Catapult Turtle with its own effect if they want to. So we Magic Jammer, and we're going to think about what we want to send for cost, and we're actually going to send the Heavy. We do have another Heavy on field that we can use to clear their back row instead, and we want to keep the monsters in hand. Maybe you could argue sending one of the beat sticks, because we do have another beat stick in hand, would have been better. But we're going to send the Heavy, and let's see how that works out for us. Looks like they're just going to pass back to us, which we're honestly fine with. Last Will is great. We're assembling more and more of our combo, and we do have Heavy on field to clear the way for if we want to pull off the combo at a later point. We're going to think about this because we could trigger Last Will now, like summon out a Jiraigumo, use Catapult Turtle, tribute it off. Last Will out a Recruiter for next turn. But that might be a bit greedy. We're just going to bring out a Login, and they're going to be fine with that, and we're just going to pass back to them. I think we were testing for like if they had a Trap Hole or something like that. They probably would have fired it on the Login here, but looks like they don't. They're going to bring out a Login of their own, and we're going to think about that, and we will actually Trap Hole it. This is good for us because now we have the board clear for our Heavy Storm, and also we protect our Login from a potential crash. They're just going to pass back to us, and we draw another Login, and we could Heavy Storm here, but honestly, I don't really think it's worth it right now because we don't have a way to get through their Wall of Illusion that well. So we're going to save the Heavy for a bit. We're just going to pass back to them. We could have done the Last Will play here if we wanted to, but I don't think it was quite necessary. We can wait on that for a bit until we actually have the OTK assembled. We're going to draw a Cannon Soldier, and with 2 Cannon Soldiers in hand, it's getting more and more tempting to use up the Last Will. And so we're going to bring out the Cannon Soldier, not use priority, and we're just going to tribute it off with Catapult Turtle. We're then going to Last Will out a Witch of the Black Forest, and we're going to Catapult Turtle that as well. So we'll be able to deal a bit more damage, search out another Jiraigumo, and I don't think they actually know about the first Jiraigumo, but now they know that we do have a way in hand to deal with the Wall of Illusion potentially. So they might change the way they're playing based on that, and that could potentially bait them into going for an aggressive play or sitting more back row that could actually deal with Jiraigumo that we can then Heavy Storm. We're just going to pass to them after that, and they're going to bring out Muka Muka, which is very big at this point, and that's very bad for us because it can't actually get over Catapult Turtle here. And with 6 cards in hand, this actually does prevent our Jiraigumos from getting over the Muka Muka, which is a bit rough. Ultimate Offering is good, but we don't actually want to set it because we'll lose it to Heavy Storm if we want to activate that. So we're just going to attack into their last set with the Login. It's revealed to be a Witch. They're going to search out a Sangan. And this is pretty rough for us. Main phase 2, we're going to activate Swords and just pass back to them. This could be a bit risky. This is a great board for them to Heavy if they do have Heavy, which makes it a little bit rough here. Because if they do Heavy our board, then we're in really bad straits. At least we can bring out the Ultimate Offering next turn and know that they're down 1 Heavy, so it's less likely for us to lose the Ultimate Offering. But it's still kind of rough. They're going to just set one, set another, and pass. And that's honestly fine by us. Giant Soldier of Stone is pretty decent, but we don't need to bring it out on the field yet. Might be worth doing in case they Heavy Storm our board away, though. They're going to search out Witch, and we're just going to pass. As I said, Giant Soldier of Stone might be worth bringing out if they have Heavy Storm, but if they do have Heavy Storm, then they're going to lose at least one of their back row. So we don't really feel the need to do that. They're going to just set another pass back to us and discard at the end of their turn for hand size a Cannon Soldier. They're going to accidentally flip up their set monster, but that was just a misclick, so it doesn't really matter here. We are going to set a Giant Soldier here, and this is a bit of a misplay. We should have set this after we attacked in case it was Man-Eater Bug. But But then again, I guess if it is Man-Eater Bug, we kind of want them to get rid of Giant Soldier of Stone, which isn't really doing anything against a Muka Muka, as opposed to the Lodging one that we have that can at least attack in. And it's just a Witch, so they are going to be able to search out a Thunder Dragon to get their hand even bigger. And we're going to pass back to them. They're going to trigger Thunder Dragon here, get 2 Thunder Dragons from deck, just deck them a little bit, and make that Muka Muka really huge. They're going to bring out a Lodgin, and is this the turn that they heavy? They might. It would be pretty bad for us if they do. But it looks like they're just going to pass back to us, and we do lose the swords. Solemn is pretty decent here, but we don't really have anything to use it on, so we're just going to heavy away their back row, crash with our Lodgins, and then set the Ultimate Offering and set the Solemn. This way, if they do have a heavy, we could Solemn it to protect our Ultimate Offering. Maybe it wouldn't be the best play, but at least it's something. I think this is a bit too risky. I think maybe I would have just set the 1 Solemn, but that opens us up to potential majorly aggressive pushes here. So they do heavy, we do Solemn. And again, I don't know how I quite feel about that, but we do it anyways. They're going to card Destruction, and that's pretty interesting. So we will lose our hand of just all monsters. Maybe we can draw some powerful spells that can get us out of the situation. We do draw Dark Hole, and Last Will, and Monster Reborn. This is very, very good for our potential OTK next turn, because we do have Ultimate Offering set, so that can enable us to pull off the OTK potentially. Let's see what they discard off of card destruction. I don't notice this at the time because I'm so focused on trying to map out the potential OTK based on the cards that I drew. But they are on dragons, it looks like. They discard Lord of D and 2 dragons that were just breaking up their hand. So that's pretty interesting, We're playing another sort of non-meta deck. And I think we're doing okay, but that Muka Muka is complicating things a bit. But I guess we'll have to see which of these non-meta decks does manage to actually take home the match. They're going to just attack him with Muka Muka, and it is a Giant Soldier of Stone, so they're not actually able to clear this anymore since the Muka is only 1800. Main phase 2, they're just going to pass back to us. Sangan's a pretty great draw here, and now we've got to think, because we could go for the OTK now. If we Dark Hole the board away, Last Will out a monster from deck, potentially Reborn the Catapult Turtle, summon out Sangan, tribute off the Sangan with a Turtle to get a Witch, tribute off the Witch to get a Gumo, bring out the Gumo, and just attack in for everything. We could potentially do it. But that set card is a bit worrying. We don't know what their set is. And that's going to give us a little bit of pause here. So we're going to think about it a bit, and we are going to go for the Dark Hole here. And then we're going to bring out Sangan, activate Last Will, and bring out a Witch. And instead of going for the full combo, which we could do, and if we do the full combo, I think that might actually kill them. Let's see. If we Reborn, Catapult Turtle, tribute off Witch, that's 550 damage, bring them down to 6,000. Search a Jiragumo, summon out the Jiragumo, attack in for 4,200. Yep. That would bring them down to 1,800, and then that would be enough to kill them on this board state. But that back row is really scary for us, so we're just going to attack in with Witch and Sangan and see if they have a response. They don't. So maybe we could have gotten in for the full OTK here, but I think it's better safe than sorry. We're going to just set the Solemn, pass back to them. We could have set the Magic Jammer, but we want the Solemn for next turn if they don't commit more back row. And so if we set Solemn and Magic Jammer here, we'd have to discard Monster Reborn if we activated Magic Jammer, and that's something that I don't think we want to do. So we don't set the Magic Jammer. This is potentially a flaw of including Magic Jammer in the deck, as occasionally you're forced into these weird positions where you really can't discard the card left in hand. So we're just going to set the Solemn, pass back to them, and they're just going to set one monster. And it's unclear what exactly that is, but I think we can potentially win here, as we can just Solemn their last remaining card. And if we Monster Reborn back a Jirai Gumo, attack into their set, deal 2100 with Sangan and Witch, they'll be at 2350. We tribute over like a Witch or Sangan, probably the Witch, for Catapult Turtle. Oh, no. We tribute over the Sangan for the Catapult Turtle, since the Witch does 550 more. We tribute off the Witch and the Gumo, that's 1650 in addition. And then we get one search off of the Sangan or the Witch. And that should do it. Even if we have to have our life points twice with the Gumo and the Solemn, we'll still have enough to pay for enough ultimate offerings to see us through. So I think this is just the end of the game. And, you know, this line of play took me a lot of thinking to come to. And this is what I mean when I say, like, this deck is hard to play. Figuring out the exact combo lines and knowing when to commit to those combo lines can be incredibly difficult. But sometimes you do just have to go for it, and I'm pretty sure this is guaranteed lethal, unless they have a Karibo, which is always a possibility. But I think even if they have Karibo, we can get through it, because they'd have to Karibo our Witch attack. And if they Karibo the Witch attack, that's just protecting themselves from 1100. And we could just do some additional tributing with Catapult Turtle, tributing even more recruiters potentially. So I think we can still do it through Karibo. So we're just going to go for this, and we are going to flip a coin. We forgot to flip a coin initially because it doesn't matter. And we do clear the Lord of D. And this is the first time that I notice that they're on dragons. Because, again, I was so focused on trying to figure out the combo line and stuff, I didn't even notice that. So they did discard earlier, so it was revealed. But, yeah, I didn't even notice it at the time. We're just going to try attacking in for everything. It looks like that back row isn't actually anything important. Yeah, it's just a bluff Monster Reborn. So we could have gone for the OTK last turn, but this was a lot safer. We're going to bring out Catapult Turtle, tribute off our entire board, search out a Lodgin, and I guess we get one more search as well, but it does not matter here because we can just bring out the Lodgin and finish them off. So that's game one. And while that was against a non-meta deck, I think it does show off how this deck can combo well and just kill the opponent out of nowhere. Even if they did have something to disrupt our combo on that last turn, the Solemn would have dealt with it, so we would be fine. And the Gumo actually enabled us to push for game, because even if they had a 2k defender, we could have gotten over it with the Gumo. So I like the Gumos in the deck, I like the Solemns in the deck, and I think this game shows off a bit of why I like them in the deck. And it also shows that you don't necessarily have to use them early on. We did use a Solemn for almost 4,000 life points, which was kind of unfortunate, but we were still able to pull off the combo at the end of the game because we didn't really need to bring out too many additional normal summons off of Ultimate Offering, which I think is generally the case. So that's why I like the Solemns and Gumos. Let's see if they still pay off for us in the next game. I think I do side in some Fissures here because the Muka Muka really gave us a lot of trouble in those games. We just had no way to easily clear it. So Fissures can help with that a bit. So we will go into game 2 here. And we are going second again because History of Yu-Gi-Oh! 1 lost the first game in the match. They are going to Thunder Dragon immediately to start out. Always great to see Thunder Dragon in the opening hand. And then they're going to Pot of Greed, so it gets even better for them. They're just going to bring out Lodgin, set one pass, and this is a really unfortunate hand on our part. It would have been great going first because we had the trap holes, but without the trap holes, we don't really have a way to deal with the Lodgin. So this is really unfortunate. We will activate Swords and then set a Solemn in case they have Heavy. But I figure if we're going to Solemn a Heavy, we might as well commit more back row here, and we're going to set a trap hole as well. They're going to set one of their own, pass back to us. We draw a Lodge in of our own, which is kind of nice. So we're going to set the ultimate offering, set the lodge-in, pass back to them. The reason we do this is because if they have trap hole, ultimate offering will enable us to dodge around the trap hole given we have catapult turtle in hand. So we want to set up for that potentially next turn. They're just going to pass back to us, and we're going to draw another solemn. We're going to flip up the ultimate offering, and we have to do this preemptively because if we chain ultimate offering to a trap hole, it has to already be face up on the field in order to use its actual effect. It's a very confusing ruling that occurs at this time related to continuous trap cards, but it's a very important ruling to know. So we're going to flip up ultimate offering and then flip up a lodge-in in case they have trap hole. And then we're just going to try and clear their lodge-in with our lodge-in. It's kind of unfortunate if they have Wuboku, and they do have Wuboku. So this might even be worth solemning just to clear away the lodge-in. We do have an extra solemn in hand that we could use on a potential heavy. But it's really rough if we did that, so I think we're just going to let the lodge-in die and then just pass back to them. We have one more turn on swords, and we do have a fair amount of beaters in the deck, so it's likely that we can clear the lodge-in in some other way. But it's just very unfortunate. We're going to lose the swords. We do draw Raigeki, and that is a way to clear the lodge-in. But we don't necessarily want to commit to the Raigeki yet. So if they bring out another monster, we guess we could trap hole, or we could just take the damage and then Raigeki that board the next turn. I don't know. It's kind of iffy. We're hoping to draw one of the other outs to lodge in our deck. So we'll take the 1800 now. They're going to set one, pass back to us. Another lodge-in is an out to lodge-in potentially. So we're going to bring out that lodge-in. And now that that's fine, we're going to think about it, and we are going to fire the Raigeki. This way we will be able to get in 1800. If they have Wuboku, they can fire Wuboku. But at least this way we won't lose our lodge-in the process. So we're going to attack in for 18. They're going to take it. Main phase 2, we're going to set another solemn just as backup. If they have some way to clear the lodge-in, we can't really afford to let them use it. So we do need this solemn here to protect ourselves. But it looks like they're just going to pass. They're going to discard a Thunder Dragon as they are at 7 cards at the end of their turn in hand. And we draw another solemn. So we're just going to attack again. We could set the third solemn just as even more insurance, but I really don't think it's necessary, and we don't want to clog up our back rows in case we draw a very good spell. They're going to set another and pass back to us, and we draw another lodge-in. We're just going to bring out that lodge-in, and if these connect, we potentially have game, because these two lodge-ins deal 3,600. They'll be down to 800 life points. We bring out Catapult Turtle, and we tribute off another lodge-in, and that will just be the end of the game if we're able to pull it off. We do have 2 solemns to back up this play as well, so I feel pretty confident about this. We're going to attack in with the lodge-in, and they do have Mirror Force, so I will solemn this because we're pushing for game at this point. We're going to drop down to 3,100, and they have a solemn of their own, so that'll drop them down to 2,200. And I know it will drop us down to 1,550, but I really do think it's worth firing this second Solemn Judgment here. If they've got like a 7 Tool to the Bandit or another Solemn Judgment of their own, then we do lose the lodge-ins, and that could be pretty bad for us. But we do have Trap Hole in case they try and normal summon out a monster, and we do have another Solemn Judgment if they have like a Reborn or some way to kill us out of nowhere. So honestly, if they do have another Solemn, I'm not too worried about that, and the fact that they'll be down to 1,100 life points is pretty nice. But it looks like they don't have another Solemn, and so that will just be the end of the game. Their remaining cards were Heavy Storm and Trap Hole. So, given that they're at 2,200, this is 3,600 damage. They don't have a way to stop it. That's the end of the game. And I hope that this game shows that even without the combo, this deck can still win. Yes, I was attacking this turn to pull off sort of the Catapult Turtle combo at the end of the game, just bring it out, tributing a monster, and getting in for lethal. But the deck is aggressive enough on its own that it can potentially do that anyways. And the Solemns provide it very necessary insulation to make that happen. Yes, if these were 2 7 tools, then that also would have worked. But, being able to use Solemn whenever, I think is just super nice. And even if they had another Solemn here, having a third Solemn that we could bring out next turn just insulates us a bit more. And at 1550 life points, it actually would cost less to use than a 7 tools. So I like the Solemns here. But, you know, you could argue this game was won because we were facing a jank deck, because Dragons is a bit jank. How does this deck do against a meta deck like Mass Controllers, Exodia, or something like that? Well, let's find out. Okay, we've got a game against DK0, and we are on the Turtle OTK deck that I just showed off in a duel. Unclear what they're on, but I guess we'll find out here. We do get to go first, which is very nice. And we're going to see what we draw here. Hopefully we draw a pretty good hand. This is honestly a... Oh, that makes it a lot better. Yeah, this is a very good hand. We can set the Sangan, set a trap hole potentially. That's pretty nice. Yeah, and that's what we're going to do. They're going to... Oh, they revealed that they have 2 Thunder Dragons in hand in the opener. Oh, that always hurts. I mean, they can always discard 1 to get another, but that's really unfortunate. It's not really a +1 in card advantage when you draw 2 in the opener, so very unfortunate. They do have a Muka Muka, though, so they would potentially be able to attack in, but we're just going to trap hole that. Remembering how bad Muka Muka was for us the previous game. They're just going to set 1 pass back to us, and we're just going to bring out Lodgin and flip up a Sangan. Try and get in for damage here. If they have Mirror Force, we get a search off Sangan. And we could even potentially Last Will to bring out another monster. So we're going to attack. It is a Mirror Force. And we are going to lose the Sangan and get a Witch. Main phase 2, we're just going to activate Swords and pass back to them. This means that they can't bring out like a Mass Sorcerer to get in for damage and a draw, or like a White Magical Hat to do the same. And so I think it's pretty good. If they do want to heavy the swords, I think we're honestly fine with that trade. So we're just going to pass back to them, and they just set 2 and pass. So feeling pretty good about that. Reborn is very nice as well. We're just going to set the Witch and pass back to them. We could have gone aggressive here, maybe reborning back a Lodgin, summoning out the Witch, and attacking in. We know that they don't have Mirror Force anymore, so this would be relatively safe to do. But I think we're saving the Reborn for a better moment. So we're just going to pass back to them. They're going to pass back to us. Pot of Greed's insanely good here. So we're going to pot. Change of Heart is great. So we could Change of Heart their set and get in for a ton of damage potentially. But I don't think we're going to do that yet because we want to get something like Cannon Soldier to make the Change of Heart even better. And they're just going to pass back to us again. And speak of the devil, and it shall appear, we have a Cannon Soldier here. So we could just go for game here. We could heavy the back row. If it's Waboku, that's unfortunate, but it might be worth doing. We're just going to flip up Sangan and Witch, Change of Heart their Sangan. And actually, we don't even need to heavy, because they'll have to Waboku this anyways if we bring out a Cannon Soldier. And if it's a trap hole, we have Last Will to bring out another Cannon Soldier. So we're going to bring a Cannon Soldier. It is trap hole, but we do have the Last Will to bring out another Cannon Soldier from deck. And you could argue that we could have brought out a Catapult Turtle here. But this is game on board. Well, once we activate Monster Reborn at least. This is going to be game. And we don't really want to show off that we're on Catapult Turtle OTK, as we haven't shown off anything that, you know, indicates to our opponent that we're on that. Yes, seeing 2 Cannon Soldiers might indicate that we're on a bit of a burn strategy, and they could side accordingly. But we don't need to tip our hat any further. So we just Reborn the Lodgin and get in for lethal damage. And Last Willing out the Cannon Soldier off of the first Cannon Soldier that we summoned felt really good. It's maybe an argument to include 2 Cannon Soldiers in more decks outside of just this Turtle OTK strategy. I'm not too sure about it because deck space is tight in a lot of these mass control lists, but it's something to consider. So we chat in the siding process, and I don't reveal that we're on Catapult Turtle OTK. I just say more Last Will targets is nice. So hopefully this will mask what we're playing a bit, and maybe we can catch them by surprise. We draw 2 Gumos, which is okay early on, but kind of unfortunate to see because we don't really want to attack in with them. They're just going to set 1 pass back to us. Last Will doesn't really do anything here, but we will set the Gumo, set a Trap Hole and a Magic Jammer, and pass back to them. We can Magic Jammer discarding the other Gumo we have in hand if we want to, so that's something to consider. They're going to think about it a bit. They're just going to set 2 and pass, and we draw a Lodgin, which is pretty nice. We're going to bring out the Lodgin and try and attack in. If they have Mirror Force, they have Mirror Force. We can Last Will to bring in another monster, and we can always Reborn if we want. We're not attacking with the Jirai Gumo anytime soon, so honestly, if they Mirror Force, we're not too concerned about it. And it's better to keep the Jirai Gumo in attack, as if I switch it to defense, then they can run over it with pretty much anything. They do have Mirror Force, and we're going to think about this. We don't actually have a way to respond to this, but we want to bluff that we do. And we're going to let that go through. We could activate the Last Will here, but I choose not to. And maybe this is a mistake if they have like a Mass Sorcerer. This is a prime board to bring that out on. But I'm saving it in case they have like a Trap Hole, I think, or something. So they're going to flip up Sangan, attack in for 1,000, and then pass back to us. So we weren't too punished by not using the Last Will there. We're going to think about this for a bit because we could get aggressive in Reborn. But we're just going to bring out the Jirai Gumo. We could attack into Sangan, but we don't really feel the need to, because if we attack into Sangan, then they can search out pretty much whatever they want from their deck. So we don't really feel the need to give them that opportunity. They're going to think about this for a bit, switch Sangan to defense, pass back to us, which is pretty nice. We can bring out Witch and attack into the Sangan. Yes, they do get the search that I mentioned before, but having 2 monsters on board makes it a bit better for us, especially given that if they want to clear the whole board away, they'll have to use either Raigeki or Dark Hole, and we do have a Magic Jammer for that. So that wouldn't be the worst. They're going to bring out a Muka Muka, which we're honestly fine with because we do have Trap Hole. And they're going to pass back to us. They're going to bring out Muka Muka. We're going to Trap Hole that away. And then they're going to activate Last Will. And this can bring them out another Muka Muka, which would be really bad for us. So we're actually going to think about this for a bit and then actually Magic Jammer. We're going to discard Last Will. There's an argument to be made for discarding either of the other cards in our hand, but I think that Last Will is doing the least here, and Heavy Storm is just such a powerful card that we want to keep it. And Reborn, is just great for getting on the aggressive pressure later on. Unfortunately, they do have a Reborn of their own, so they will be able to bring out the Muka Muka. But now their hand is down to 5, so they won't be able to clear the Witch until they activate Thunder Dragon's effect and bump up their hand size to 6. So now they will actually be able to clear the Jirai Gumo, which is quite unfortunate. They'll attack into the Gumo, we'll take 100. They'll attack into the Witch, we'll take 200. But we can always search out another monster with the Witch. We're going to search our deck and think about it for a bit, and we are just going to bring out a Lodgin here. You could argue that we should bring out a Jirai Gumo, because we can always bring it out, attack the Muka, potentially get in that way. Solemn is not the best on this board. We're going to try and heavy the back row so that we can go for the Reborning Gumo play, but they do have Waboku there, so that'll make it a lot less good. It's kind of a rough spot that we're in now. We don't really want to commit the Lodgin to board because we'll just lose it, but we're potentially losing a lot of life points here from this attack. We're going to think about it for a bit, and we're just going to set the Solemn and pass. We figure that we're not dead from this attack here. On board, they've got 3,700 after they draw their next card, and they might not want to commit everything to board in case we have a Waboku or a Mirror Force. So we're willing to take the risk, and luckily it does pay off. We do take 2,400 here because they've got 6 cards in hand, and they're just going to set 1 and pass. And man, oh man, does our risk pay off here. We have a Dark Hole. So we're just going to Dark Hole the board away, and we punish them because they do have a Faith set, which is incredibly good. We can bring out the Lodgin, and now we actually have a choice because we could bring out a Gumo as well. Attack in, have their life points. Yes, we could have our own life points, which could be a bit risky, but we do have Solemn to deal with whatever they have, so it might be worth the risk. We choose not to go for it here, But we do think about it quite a bit, and we attack in. And so we drop them down by 1800, but I think we're saving the Reborn for later. And this is actually a major mistake on our part because drawing the Lodge in here, we could have potentially just won. If they don't have a Karibo in hand, bring out the Lodge in, and if we had already had the Jiragumo on field, we could have attacked over their set with a Lodge in, and then attacked in for 4,000 with Jiragumo and Lodge in. Yes, it is a bit risky, and hindsight's 2020. Looking at the game state now, we know that their set is not a 2K defender, and they didn't really have a good way to deal with Jiragumo. Although they could have potentially dealt with it. They did have Change of Heart and a Muka Muka. Muka Muka wouldn't have been able to clear the Gumo on its own, but if they summoned out Muka Muka, Change of Hearted the Gumo, or attempted to, then we would have been in pretty dire straits. But I think we still should have gone for the aggressive play here because we were so low on cards that we kind of needed it, and we only have one Solemn activation. So I think we should have just gone aggressive, and we may have been able to win this one. As is, we didn't, and we will get majorly punished for it. We're going to bring out a Lodge in, just try and attack in to what they've got, and they're going to bring back a Reborn, which is very unfortunate for us. And they're going to think about this for a bit. They will bring out the Muka Muka. We're not going to Solemn this because we know that if we Solemn this, they have a Reborn anyways, so there's no point to it. And they're just going to be able to attack into our Lodge in. We'll take 6. They're going to set 1 pass back to us, which is okay, but we don't really have a good way to use it here. We could Reborn the Jiragumo and get over Muka Muka that way, summon out Witch, attack in for a lot of damage. And I think that is what we're going to try and do. We're going to bring out the Witch. We're going to Reborn out the Gumo, and we're just going to attack in here. We're going to activate head, or we're going to call heads. They're going to flip up Woboku here. And this is actually a bit of a thinker. We know they have Reborn, but if they have to use Reborn, then Muka Muka will drop below Gumo's attack. And so it might honestly be worth Solemning the Woboku here, just to make sure the attack goes through. We'll drop down to 1,800, and if we do lose our coin flip on Jiragumo, we'll drop down to 900, which does just kill us because they can Reborn the Muka Muka, attack into the Witch, and that'd be really bad for us. But if we do call Gumo's coin flip correctly, then we will be still safe here, unless they've got like Raigekis or Dark Holes or something, which isn't out of the question. So we're just going to go for this play. We're going to go for the risky play. And let's hope that we don't call the coin flip wrong here. Unfortunately, we do call it wrong. So that will just be the end of the game because we know they have Reborn and they can just Reborn back the Muka Muka. So that's game 2. And I think that this game shows how tricky the deck can be because, you know, there's a lot of considerations to make in terms of how aggressive you want to go. If we had gone a bit more aggressive here, I think this game would have turned out, well, we might have still lost, but it would have been less, you know, in our opponent's favor. We could have potentially won. So we lose the second game, and, you know, I think maybe we could have pulled it out if we played differently, but again, this deck is really hard to play. Playing jank decks in Critter is often super difficult because a lot of the meta decks get so much more card advantage than you do. And when you're faced with board states like that, where your opponent is so up on cards, and you need to decide whether to just go for game or play it safe, it can be really tricky. It can be really tricky judging whether you want to do that or not. So I think that is a contributing factor in what makes this deck so hard. But, you know, we still got game 3 to go, and I think we can definitely win. And with a hand like this, oh, this is a killer hand here. This is super good. We're just going to bring out a Lodgin, set a Last Will as a bluff, and pass back to them. They're going to Pot of Greed, and they're going to be able to draw 2 cards here. Fisher away our Lodgin, kind of unfortunate. And then they are going to bring out Mass Sorcerers, so they're going to attack in. We're going to pretend to think about it, and we're just going to take it. So they will draw a card. They forgot to draw there. And we can clear the Mass Sorcerers. That is what I think we're going to try to do. We're going to bring out a Cannon Soldier here. They do trap hole it, so we can Lost Will. So that's very nice. Unfortunately, we make a major misplay here. We activate the Lost Will that we have in hand instead of the one on field. And the reason this is such a major misplay is that if we had activated the one on field, we could set the trap hole and not play into heavy. If we set the trap hole now, then we've got 2 back row, they've got none. That's an easy heavy storm for our opponent. But unfortunately, we activate the Lost Will in hand instead of the one on the field, and that will come back to bite us a lot. We could just activate the other Lost Will here, just get 2 monsters on field, but that plays into board clears. We would have ideally liked to just keep 1 monster on field with the Lost Will, set the trap hole, and pass back to them. Unfortunately, you know, we don't, and this is really rough for us. We'll bring out the Giant Soldier and just attack into their monster, hoping that's not a Mass Sorcerer. It isn't, but we can't get over it, so kind of unfortunate. We'll switch the Witch to defense. They're going to bring out a Lodgin, attack into our Giant Soldier, and this is where not setting the trap hole is coming back to bite us in a major way. If we had set the trap hole, we could use the trap hole on the Lodgin, and we could have potentially even Raigeki'd the Giant Soldier the next turn, gotten in for 2,400 damage. Wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world. Unfortunately, now we do lose the Giant Soldier. Ultimate Offering is not going to help us very much, and we will Raigeki their board away, attack in with the Witch, and we're going to set the trap hole, play into the heavy, but we kind of feel we have to, and it's unfortunate. They do have the heavy. They are losing a card of their own, so that is somewhat nice, but it's, you know, it's trap hole, which we could play around with Ultimate Offering in hand, so I don't know. Losing that Last Will is very rough. We could also play around trap hole with Last Will as well, so if we had a Last Will, that trap hole would not have mattered to us, so kind of unfortunate. They're going to bring out a Cannon Soldier, attack over the Witch. At least we do get a search here, so we'll be able to find a Lodgin, which is nice. And they'll pass back to us. Change of Heart's very good here. We're going to bring out Lodgin. That will get trap hold, and we are going to go for the Change of Heart now. Maybe we should have saved the Change of Heart, but I think we don't want them to get us in a point where they can use Cannon Soldier just to finish us off out of nowhere. So we're going to attack in with the Cannon Soldier, tribute it off for 500 extra damage, and then just pass to them. They're going to set one, and given that they didn't attack here, we could probably have the read that it is like a Magician of Faith or something. So we could Dark Hole it, as they do have some good spells in Grave. I don't know, it's kind of risky because if we Dark Hole it, we don't really have a way to clear whatever monsters they bring out. Although I guess if we search like a Gumo off of Witch, then we could potentially get in that way. We do have the Ultimate Offering to dodge around Trap Hole. They haven't used up a Mirror Force yet, so that could punish us. I don't know. We're just going to bring out the Witch. And actually, we could do a slick play here. We could Dark Hole the board now, search out a Gumo, and get in for 2,200 to put them on a bit more of a clock. I think that's a bit greedy, but we could do that as well. I think the best play to have done would have just been to Dark Hole the board. Unfortunately, we don't do that. They do get a search with the Magician back a Pot of Greed, and they will fire the Pot of Greed and get a ton of advantage on us. And at this point, the game is pretty much over because we don't really have ways to stop them from getting in, and they've got enough cards to probably deal with whatever we've got. Looks like they're just going to set 2, though, which is nice for us. I mean, we can just attack in with Witch. Fisher's a good draw, too, because if they bring out a Beater, we can search with the Witch, Fisher away their monster, pass back to them. They're just going to set one, and this is a bit of a thinker. We could Dark Hole the board away, go for a Jirai Gumo, and try and attack in that way. That honestly might be the play to make. We do know they're on mass control, so there's a risk in attacking with the Witch here, but we are just going to do it. I think this is a really bad play on our part because if it is a Recruiter, they can just search something to deal with the Witch. If it is not, then, I mean, why are we attacking into it? We can't get over it with the Witch, most likely. And if it's like a Magician of Faith, they're going to get that effect anyways. So I think on this board state, we definitely should have Dark Hold. But unfortunately, we just attack in. It is a Mass Sorcerer, and they do get to draw a card here. We will Fisher away the Mass Sorcerer to prevent them from getting in more draws, but we're in a really rough spot. They're so far ahead of us. They're going to Change of Heart the Witch, tribute that off for a Thunder Dragon. We will get a search here. So we'll search out the Jiraigumo, and we will actually be able to protect ourselves a little bit. We will activate Ultimate Offering. We're thinking about whether to pay 5 or to chain Ultimate Offering to itself to dodge around Trap Hole, paying 1,000. We are just going to pay the 5. If they Trap Hole, we can always Dark Hole their Thunder Dragon away, even though that would feel really bad. But it looks like they're not going to do that. They're just going to pass back to us. And a Fisher's pretty good. We could just Fisher away their Thunder Dragon and just try attacking in for 2,200. We're going to Heavy Storm there. They're going to Waboku, but they did have a Mirror Force. So we're going to Fisher away their Thunder Dragon just in case they can clear the Jiraigumo. And we're going to pass back to them. They do have a way to clear the Jiraigumo, which makes sense. They've got so many cards in hand. They're going to bring out Login, attack in, and they're just going to set one and pass. Swords is pretty good. We're going to activate Swords, pass back to them. We could have Dark Hold here just to clear the way in case they do have a heavy. They've used up one heavy already, so it's unlikely they have another in hand, but just in case. They're just going to pass back to us, and we draw Magic Jammer. And Magic Jammer is interesting because if they do heavy, we do want to protect our swords. But if we have to use Magic Jammer to do that, we'd have to use Dark Hole. So it's kind of iffy because we want the Dark Hole in hand because we don't really have too many ways to deal with the Login. So honestly, I think what we could do here is fire the Dark Hole, save the Magic Jammer in hand, because we're mainly using the Magic Jammer so that way they can't attack in with Login if they heavy. So I think maybe we should have done that, but we just do set the Magic Jammer. I think this is a bit of a risk, and they will activate Last Will here, and we're going to think about this a bit, but that's fine. They will heavy. We Magic Jammer to keep the swords up. They're going to think about this, but they're going to check our graveyard, think about it a bit more, and they're going to tribute set over the Login with the Thunder Dragon, get out a Sangan from the deck with the Last Will, and pass back to us. And we're in a really bad spot now. We draw another Magic Jammer with no cards in hand. And this is one of the major flaws with Magic Jammer is that, you know, if you don't have cards in hand, it's basically useless. So we're going to pass back to them, and they're going to pass back to us. Pot of Greed's very nice here. Maybe we can draw a way to deal with this. We can attack into their Sangan with Cannon Soldier. And then we have a Trap Hole left for Thunder Dragon. But we're not going to do that. I think we're worried if they have like a Fisher or something, then they can clear the Cannon Soldier, potentially get in for a fair amount of damage. Also, we do have the Trap Hole to stop the Thunder Dragon from flipping up, and if they don't have a way to get over a Cannon Soldier otherwise, then this will fend off a Sangan attack. I do think this is a bit iffy, though. They've used up 2 Fisher already and a Change of Heart. So I think we could have felt comfortable just attacking into their Sangan. But I guess the big fear here is if they get a Cannon Soldier off the Sangan, if they're playing 2 of that. Or if they get a Mass Sorcerer and they have a way to clear the... I don't know. This is a bit iffy. They're going to think about it a bit, and they're going to think about it a bit more. Flip up the Thunder Dragon. We are forced to Trap Hole that. And they will Dark Hole the board away and reveal that they had Last Will anyways and Reborn, so we were dead here anyways. But so that game 3, I think I made some major misplays. If we had played this better, we definitely could have managed to turn game 3 around. But, you know, that's Yu-Gi-Oh! Misplays happen, and the best thing that you can do is learn from them. And I think that I definitely learned from them this game. But, you know, this does bring up a part of the deck that may turn some players off, is that Critter is already a format that can make misplays very, very devastating, as it's a very skill-intensive format, and there are just so many cards that can really punish you for misplaying. And Turtle OTK is a deck that's very easy to misplay with. It can have some unintuitive combo lines. It can force you to commit, at times when you might be taking a big risk, and you'll have to rely on reading what your opponent has and what they don't have in order to know whether you're actually able to do that or not. And it can require some very tough decisions. So this deck is really not for the faint of heart. If you want to play a deck that's a bit easier, then I think that this deck is not for you. But I do think it is extremely fun, and I think it can win games against top decks if you do not misplay. And it can also win against a lot of jank decks as well. Like, I'm not sure this deck is tier 1, but I think it is definitely at least tier 2. If you want to challenge yourself with a deck that's pretty good, I think that this deck is a good deck to pick up. I have one more game for y'all, though, because I showed off this deck against one of the tier 1 decks in the format, but there is another deck that looms very large in the format. So let's see how the deck does against that. Okay, we've got a game here against Keka. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce their name on DB, but this was another game just like the game I showed off with Kwrong212 a lot earlier on the channel in my first hand control video, where I was just on DB and I saw that someone was hosting a game in Critter and just said Critter as the description and was just welcoming anyone to join. And so I joined and we played. And it was a very fun game. And so, you know, that is another way to get games in this format on DB. Just asking for anyone to play. And it's nice to see that Critter is a well-liked enough format to actually get games like that. So, and get people seeking out games like that. So this was a very delightful experience for me. And it's great to feature them on the channel for the first time. So we are going to win the rock, paper, scissors, and so we're going to go first. Unclear what they're on right now. They have 6 cards in their fusion deck, which may just be a bluff, or it may not be, but who knows. Last Roll is very good, especially given that we do have Cannon Soldier, and we also have Dark Hole. So this is very nice. We're just going to set the Cannon Soldier, set a Trap Hole. If they bring out a beater that can get over Cannon Soldier, then we Trap Hole it. If they don't, and try and attack into the Cannon Soldier, then we dodge around Trap Hole ourselves. So we're feeling pretty good about that. They're going to reveal Thunder Dragon, get 2 cards from deck, and then they're just going to not set that one. They're going to set that one and pass. So unclear what they're playing yet. It could be like the mass control sort of list that DK0 was just playing, or it could be Exodia, or it could just be a deck playing Thunder Dragon for the card advantage. Either way, we're going to bring out a Login, flip up a Cannon Soldier, try and attack in, and it is a Witch, and they're going to search out a piece of Exodia. So that reveals that they are indeed on Exodia. And that will change the way that we're playing a little bit. We can get a little bit more aggressive here. We're going to set the Ultimate Offering. This is a bit metagamey because we know that a lot of Exodia decks don't play heavy in the main. So if they are on heavy in the main, then we can get punished by this. But we're just going to go for it just to have it, to potentially go even more aggressive. They're going to set 1 pass back to us. And we figure that they don't have Mirror Force, or else they would have fired it already. So we're going to think about this a bit. We could potentially just attack into their set with Login and have Cannon Soldier in defense to dodge around Mirror Force, but that doesn't enable us to get more aggressive. We could Dark Hole the board away and then Last Will out another monster. We could Tribute over a Cannon Soldier or Login with the Catapult Turtle and then Last Will out like a Witch and then bring out a Gumo potentially later. But of all the options, we're just going to attack into their set with the Login, and we're not able to clear it, so we're just going to pass back to them. We could have set the Trap Hole there, but given it's Exodia, we didn't really feel a need to, and we didn't really want to clog up our back row. They're just going to set another and pass back to us, and this is kind of what we were waiting for, because I think we can actually potentially win. The issue is what their back row is. So drawing Solemn's nice. It can enable us to potentially deal with whatever back row they have next turn. So we're just going to attack into the Alchemator. We'll take 200, unfortunately. Set the Solemn. We're not going to go for a super aggressive push yet. We're going to set the Solemn to deal with like a Woboku or something if they've got it. And they're going to switch Giant Soldier to attack into Cannon Soldier. And that's perfectly fine by us. Seems like they've got a Last Will play potentially. And so they're going to Last Will indeed. And we're going to think about this because we could solemn it. Because if they're going for a play like this, it could mean that they can just get Exodia out with whatever recruiter they search. So it's a bit risky, but we are going to let it go through. And we're just hoping that they're doing this to get another recruiter out of the deck and potentially search another piece, and that they can't quite assemble the full pieces of Exodia yet. But they're going to set one and pass back to us. If that set is a recruiter, then they can search two pieces, and it might be the end of the game for us. This is very, very worrying, and I think we have to just go aggressive here. If they've got two recruiters and they can get to Exodia, then they win anyways. So we just have to go for this. So we're going to think about it a bit to assemble just what our combo line is going to be. And then we just go for it. We're going to tribute off the Lodgin and the Cannon Soldier to deal 1,000 damage to our opponent. Then we're going to Dark Hole the board and just hope that they don't have Exodia. That is very, very reassuring, seeing that they have the Witch set there. Or not the Witch, the Magician of Faith set there. Because this means that the Last Will play was likely just to have a spell on Grave so that way they could get it back off of the Magician of Faith, set a Thunder Dragon over the Magician of Faith or a Recruiter, and get out another Recruiter from deck. So that is very reassuring. It seems like they don't have Exodia, so we can just keep going for this. We're going to activate Last Will, and we can bring out a Recruiter here. And, just as shown in the Eel replay, we can actually push for game here. So we are going to tribute out the Catapult Turtle. They're going to think about that, so we're not actually going to activate the Ultimate Offering yet, even though we did flip it up in excitement. But no matter what they do, we do have Solemn to deal with it. So the big fear here is if they have Karibo, but it's unlikely they do. We're going to flip up Ultimate Offering. They're going to Solemn this, and that is correct. I think you do have to Solemn the Ultimate Offering in this situation. But unfortunately for them, we do have a Solemn of our own. So we will be able to stop that from happening. And this will actually be enough to kill them. 2,100 damage plus whatever we get from Witch. Tributing is good enough. So that will be game one, and let's just check how many pieces they had in hand there. Okay, they had 3 pieces in hand, so they were getting close. So I'm very glad we made this aggressive push now. But that was a pretty good matchup against Exodia. And that just will be the end of the game there. So I think that, game 1 against Exodia, this deck can actually win somewhat handily. Because Exodia will enable them to get the pieces to the combo acquired and just burn them out with a big aggressive push, and then the Catapult Turtles or Cannon Soldiers at the end of the game. There are some flaws in this matchup, as we're not playing Fishers in the main deck, and so if they do wall up enough and we don't draw like a Dark Hole or Raigeki, that can be a little bit rough, even though we can feel a bit more comfortable attacking with Jirai Gumo because they're less likely to go aggressive. But I do think that in general, Turtle OTK does have a good matchup against Exodia, at least for game 1. Given that, after side decking, I feel like Exodia is playing just a weaker version of Mass Control. I think that our deck is actually very well matched against it for game 2, so I feel like we don't really have to side in anything. I think I actually might side in some Fishers in place of Giant Soldiers of Stone, but I forget what I did at the moment, so we'll just have to see. And we are going second, of course. They get to go first as they lost game 1. And let's see what they do here. They're just going to set 2 and pass back to us. This isn't the best hand. We're just going to swords in case they've got Mass Sorcerers in the wings. And they reveal that it's a Sanyan, which doesn't really tell us much about whether they sided out of the Exodia strat or not. We're just going to set a Solemn, set an Ultimate Offering. In case they have Heavy Storm here, we don't want them getting in a Mass Sorcerer poke. And they're just going to set another pass back to us, which is a decent draw. We can start getting in here. And we'll attack the Sangan. Sangan will trigger, and they'll search out an Exodia piece, which means that they are still on Exodia. But I feel like we do have a pretty good hand here to deal with that. We did side in the Fishers. We do have Catapult Turtle tributing over Witch, which can then search out a like Jiraiguma or something. And we do have Ultimate Offering to be able to bring that out as well. So I'm feeling pretty confident about this. And we're just going to pass back to them. They're going to send another Reborn out a Sangan. And we could Solemn this, as likely they'll have a couple recruiters in play after this. And that would enable them to search out a couple of Exodia pieces, which could potentially be the end of the game. So Solemning this wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but we figure it's still early in the game, and we could potentially win in the next couple turns before they have a chance to search too many pieces. So we are going to let this go through. They will Reborn out the Sangan, pass back to us, and Dark Hole makes it, all but assured that we can win this. As long as they can't search out Exodia when we activate Dark Hole. We're going to activate Dark Hole, and they're going to be fine with that. And they will get 2 searches for Exodia pieces. And we just got to hope that that doesn't actually search them the entire thing. They already have 1 piece in hand that we know about. We just got to hope that they don't have 2 more. And let's see what happens here. They search out left leg, left arm. And that will actually be the end of the game, because they show us their hand, and they just hard drew 2 pieces, which happens in Exodia, So we did not manage to win this game, even though we got pretty aggressive early on. But we do see that they chose not to side out of Exodia in game 2. So we're hoping maybe they won't side out of Exodia in game 3. And we're going to keep the deck largely the same. I think we do keep the Fishers in as well, because I think they're pretty good against the defenders. But we're just going to go to game 3. And we say nice because that was really nice, being able to assemble Exodia that early. It's always cool seeing Exodia pop off with an early win. So even if I lose against it, I'm not too upset. We're going to draw for turn, and Lodgin's a pretty good one. We don't necessarily have to commit it to board yet, because we figure that they're probably on Exodia again. And we are indeed not going to commit it to board. If they do have a Masked Sorcerer to get in here, we get punished for this. But I think in general this plays around Fisher a bit, and given that we don't have any other monsters in hand, I think we do need to play it safe. They are going to heavy, and so we get kind of punished for setting 2. We could have solemned that, but honestly, if they are still on Exodia, we don't really need the trap hole as much. So we're not going to do that, and maybe we'll get punished for that if they bring out like a white magical hat or something, or like a Lodgin of their own. But they're just going to set 1 and pass. We're going to bring out Lodgin, attack into their set, see what it is. It is a giant soldier, and we can't get over that, so we're just going to set a solemn pass back to them. They're just going to pass back to us, and we draw Fisher, which is perfect, because otherwise we would have had a bit of a debate here about whether we Raigeki, the giant soldier, or not. Now we can just Fisher it away. So we're going to Fisher it, and then just get in for 18. 4 more attacks like this, and we'll have game. They're going to set another pass back to us. Last Will is pretty decent. We could Dark Hole this board away, and then Last Will to bring out like a Witch or something. I don't really think that's the best thing to do here, but it's an option. We're going to attack into their set with Lodgin, and it is just a Witch, so they will be able to search here, which is kind of unfortunate for us. They do get a piece to hand, and they're just going to pass. We're just going to pass back to them. They have swords, and we could solemn this, but we do have heavy, so we can just do that instead. Magic Jammer comes a turn too late, unfortunately, but I think we... this is a bit tricky. Do we heavy now, or do we not heavy now? If we heavy now, we kind of have to Raigeki, so that way we're actually getting in damage this turn. But I don't necessarily think we have to get too aggressive here. It's a bit iffy. I think I'm saving the Magic Jammer in case I do have to heavy later. I don't want to have another back row set. And if they do activate a spell card that is disastrously bad for us, then we can always just solemn it if we have to. They're going to set another pass back to us. We draw another Lodgin. So honestly, we could heavy here, Raigeki their board away, summon out a Lodgin, and just get in for 36. That might be worth doing. And it looks like that is what we're doing. And we get really lucky here that they didn't have any recruiters set. They just had 2 flip monsters that would have helped them out tremendously. We're going to heavy storm the board away, get in for 36, set a magic jammer, pass back to them. We feel pretty confident here. Last Will plus Dark Hole is very powerful, even if they manage to wall up in the future. They're going to set 2, pass back to us. And Cannon Soldier is great. We could just Dark Hole here, summon out Cannon Soldier, Last Will out a Witch or something, attack in, and that would be game using Cannon Soldier's effect in main phase 2. It's a bit risky though if they have like a Mirror Force or Wuboku. So we're going to think about this a bit, and we're just going to go for it. We're just going to attack into their set. Luckily for us, it is a Mask of Darkness, and they're just going to take 18 here. So we will actually be able to win, because even if they have Trap Hole, we can bring out Cannon Soldier and, tribute out our monsters with priority. And then we've got a Last Will to bring out another one. If it's Solemn Judgment, then we can actually still win as well, because then we Dark Hold our board away, Last Will out like Catapult Turtle, and that's perfectly fine to win that way. So we do just summon out Cannon Soldier and use its effect with priority, and they reveal that they just had a Wuboku. So if they had used Wuboku, this would have maybe played out differently, but honestly, it would have just been a stopgap measure. They had 3 pieces in hand and then a Thunder Dragon or 2, so I don't think that they were in a good spot here, and I think they could get lethal through Wuboku, just with the board state that we had. But that's going to do it for this match. I wanted to show off how the deck matches up against Exodia, because I think it does have a really good matchup. And I know this video is already long enough, but I think that this game was quick enough to make it worth including as well. I hope that you all enjoyed this video and enjoyed watching the deck play out. I hope that, this maybe inspires more people to experiment with the deck and try out new things with it, because I think it is really fun. And while it may not reach like tier 1 status anytime soon, I think that it really is a tier 2 level deck that can get you some really fun wins. But let me know in the comments down below if you want to see more of this deck in action, or if you want to see the Shield and Sword variant of it in action, or just if you have suggestions for improving this version of the deck in general. I think that my updated version of the deck is still very much a work in progress, and there are definitely things that I could change. Like, I think seeing how badly the deck fared against Muka Muka shows how much it really wants Fissure in the main deck. So maybe I should include some Fissures, maybe swap out like an Ultimate Offering or a Last Will in order to do that. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. And of course, as always, if you liked this video, be sure to give it a like. And if you like this content in general, featuring like these old retro formats with some interesting decks, then definitely subscribe to my channel. We're almost at 250, and that is a really cool milestone to reach. So I want to thank you all for that. Also, one last thing to let me know down in the comments below. Do you prefer this sort of long video where I compile a bunch of duels featuring one deck together? Or do you prefer me to split it up into multiple videos? I want to know, so that way I can tailor these videos more towards y'all in the future and hopefully just make the channel better. But until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.